Hey, welcome to part 2 about Tribal Butterfly's tips on cosplay, understanding the pattern, and I hope you guys are enjoying it so far. There's a lot more we've got to cover, so let's get to it. Okay, so that covers what these guys do. When you get a pattern, remember that these are just as awesome as the patterns themselves. So these guys are done, which brings us to these huge tissue papery guys. And when I say huge, I mean huge. And I really hope that I'm going to be able to fold this back up again. So okay, these things are massive. It's like a road map almost. But you want to very, very carefully unfold them because they are very delicate and they rip if you're not very careful. Okay. Now, these are usually folded in sets of 2, so... Okay, this is one complete one, and this is a second complete one. These guys are massive because they need to cover your whole body. Okay? So... that's why they're so big, and sometimes pattern pieces don't even fit on one of these, so you actually have to fit together piece A to piece B. So if that ever happens, it'll be like pattern piece 1A and pattern piece 1B will be like the addition to that pattern piece 1A that didn't fit on the sheet. So you would just match them together so that they actually fit. And I think that actually happens in this pattern too, so if it's on this sheet, I'll show you. Because I saw A and B when I was showing you guys that little booklet, so that's good to know too. I'm glad this pattern had that so I can show you guys. This is what a pattern looks like before it has been cut out. Now, one thing about this pattern is it does not show you various sizes the way that normal patterns do, because with a kimono a lot of the time it's just the length that changes and the rest kind of stays mostly the same. So all the lines are, no matter what size you are, you're just going to cut on that line. There's just only this one that I found that has different sizes. So if you look here, you've got size 6, 8, 10, and 12. I know it's hard for you guys to see it. It's a little bit blurry, but it does actually have different sizes. So what you would do is when you're cutting out your pattern, you're going to cut on the common line, because this line is for all sizes, and then when you get to a point where it says what size do you want, you cut to that size, and then you cut on that size, and then you just keep cutting. Okay, so what you're going to do is you're always going to find your pattern size that fits you, and you're always going to cut on the line that says your size. And then when you meet a common line where they all join, you just cut on that common line, because that line's there no matter what size you are, okay? And usually the size lines will be a different kind of line. Like one of them will be a solid line, and then another one will be a dotted line, and another one will be a staggered dotted line, you know? You follow always the line that pertains to your size. In this case, the lines don't cross over each other, so they didn't bother making them different sorts of lines, but you would still be able to tell because they'd always remind you what size you're cutting. So always cut on the size that is for you and never mix sizes, okay, you guys? So that's one really important thing to know when you are cutting out your pattern pieces, because these are all pieces of your pattern and you're going to cut out all the ones you need, okay? So for example, if I was making the kimono and I didn't want to make the obi for some reason, I would not cut out the obi pieces because I'm just making the kimono. So I'm just gonna cut out the pieces that say kimono on them. Okay, now so let's talk about reading a pattern. Pattern pieces will have many things on them, okay? Many things that are always on them. One of them will always be the number, so that you know what part of the pattern piece you're doing. It's also a great way to keep track, to make sure you're not missing any pieces or have any pieces that you don't need, okay? They will always list what they are. So this is the front and back of pattern C, okay? So C is actually that little shirt. So this is the front and back of that little shirt, okay? Patterns will also have how many pieces of this pattern you are supposed to be cutting. So in this case, it says to cut 2 of this. And when you are looking at how many to cut, you also want to look at this long, arrowy, pointed line, okay? This is called a grain line, okay? And what this is for is, number 1, it tells you whether or not you have to cut in the middle of the fabric or on the fold, and I'll explain on the fold to you later. But basically with this, what you would do is you would put it somewhere that was away from the fold of the fabric and place it down, and you would cut 2 of them there, okay? Because whenever you cut your fabric, you always cut it folded in half. So if you cut it somewhere in the middle of the folded fabric, when you cut all the way around this, it's actually going to cut 2 pieces, whereas if you put it towards the fold, it would cut 1 piece that you would unfold, and it would be both sides of 1 piece, okay? I hope that made sense. You know what? Let me show you what I mean. Okay, so this is a piece of fabric. You're actually looking at it upside down, sorry, but this is a piece of fabric, and it is a woven material, which means that, think about like basket weaving. So basically the strands of fabric have been woven across each other to make this fabric, okay? And when you look at fabric, there are different parts to your fabric, believe it or not. There are strands that go across the fabric from side to side, left to right, and these are called, I believe, the weft strands, okay? There are fabrics, like you can see, these ones right here, that go down the fabric, okay? These are called the warp strands, and where these pieces of fabric cross over in a 45-degree angle, that's called the bias. That's very important, okay? This is the bias of the fabric, okay? So across is weft, up and down is warp, and diagonally is your bias, okay? Now, these parts here, the sides, these are called your selvage, okay? You don't really want to be using your selvage because it's ugly, as you can see. So, the reason why I'm telling you this is because those arrows, those grain lines that I was telling you about before, they are very important when placing your pattern pieces on your material, okay? That's why I'm telling you. Now, you are almost never going to be cutting out your pattern pieces on your fabric flat like this. You're pretty much always going to fold it in half. Normally, you want to fold it so that the good side of the fabric, the fashion side that you're going to want to be the outside of your garment, you're usually going to want that to be on the inside of the fold, okay? I did it backwards because it was already folded like this and it was easier for me to fold it this way right now for you guys, but you always want to have the pretty side on the inside of your fold, because that way if anything happens, it happens to the bad side, okay? So always fold it so that the pretty side is actually on the inside, not on the outside. Okay, so I made this fake little pattern piece. Let's pretend that this is an actual pattern piece, okay? And you have your grain line and it's pointing up and down and it'll say on it cut 2. So what you're going to do is you're going to place this pattern piece so that the arrow points to the absolute top and the absolute bottom of your fabric, okay? You're not going to put it this way because your grain line always, always, always has to go along your warp strands, okay? So you're going to put it down and you're actually going to have to, you know, turn it so that it's specifically going straight up and down. You don't want it to be like this. You don't want it to be, you know, like that. You definitely don't want it like this. Make sure that it's always facing your top to your bottom. Always, always, always. Okay, so it looks like this is actually going to be a 3-parter. Sorry everybody, but there's a lot of information when it comes to patterns. See you in part 3.